We are here to spend about 45 minutes geeking out about the Red Lion. Every brick, every timber frame, you name it, we're going to go into it. And this talk is going to cover 4 sections, okay? And hopefully I'm going to be finished by 10. All right? So we're going to look at the original Red Lion that stood on this very site for centuries. We're going to talk a bit about the historic pub sections, because we're going to see that this pub used to look very, very different. And some of you, in the olden days, may have not sat on this side, but on the other side, vice versa, for a very specific reason. We're going to talk about the 1924 road widening, which resulted in that old pub being demolished, and this fine building being constructed. And this talk is also going to answer the ancient old question, why do pubs have so many doors, but only one is always in use? Why does this one is there, and it's always locked, and that one, and that one, and that one? Well, after this talk, you'll know exactly. You're going to see that each one of those doors used to lead to a specific partitioned room in the pub. And based on your social class, gender, and purpose, you would go to one but not the other. And we're going to talk all about that, right? But old pubs, you're going to see and now understand why they have 5 doors. So let's start with the old Red Lion. I don't think there's anyone here that's old enough to remember it. I don't make any assumptions, but probably not. You look at the old Red Lion, it was first recorded in 1697, but it's probably much older than that. Okay, there's always a reference in all the old archives and town guides that it was first recorded in 1697. So this is an old map of the area in 1741, but you can see that back then, Stoke-Newington was just Church Street, right? We're just there, there's a few inns and other kind of buildings on the junction with the High Street. But if you looked all around, it was just green pastures and meadow. And you had the Mere River, you had the Hackney Brook, and pretty much that's it. And we were there. Yay! The Red Lion was there back then. This is 1846. Okay, and you can see again the kind of the fork where we are now with Logic Road. And if you look closely, something interesting about this map is that you can see that the Red Lion is actually not just one building on this map. You can kind of see these lines cutting through it. I'm sure you've looked at this map all the time. And you're going to see that the reason is because the original Red Lion was actually 2 separate buildings. As you can see from this drawing from 1869, right, it's not your purpose-built pub like you see today. You can clearly see that there was one building and then there was another one, and they got merged together. Right? But that's not really surprising, as you're going to see in a minute. Okay, so the original numbering was number 41, so this was 41 Church Street. The one next to it was number 40. They were renumbered in 1880, renumbered 114 and 116. Church Street was renumbered twice, because originally there were only like 10 houses. They didn't even have numbers. It was just Mr. Johnson, no, Mr. Thompson. No, that was how the postie knew where to go. But as more houses were built, in the 19th century, all the old mansions were torn down. They had to keep renumbering, adding more numbers to the street. The Red Lion was also renumbered a few times. It got its current number 132 in 1937, and the street was renumbered again. Now, the fact that it was 2 separate houses should not be very surprising, because a lot of public houses actually just started as someone's house. Again, it's a public house. But it was just someone's house. Back in the day, somewhere in the countryside, you basically just had a kitchen, you made your own beer, and you would invite people to just come in. You would sell them beer, hopefully if you had a license to do that. Right? So they might have just been in the kitchen. As you can see, it was very dog-friendly as well. But I think the idea was if you bring your dog, they have to help out as well, just with some kitchen duties. Right? But this was the idea, that it was someone's house, and over time it evolved. And it became more established and more formal. Now, you can imagine that back in the day, and this is going to be key to what we're going to talk about, if you just invited someone to your house, if they were wearing work clothes like farmers, and they had like dirty clothes with grease and sort of manure or whatnot, you're probably not going to take them to the best room in the house. We have all the padded seating and the carpets and all that. You're probably say, just stay on the wooden bench in the kitchen. Right? You go there and the missus will serve you while your dog is spinning. Okay, that was the idea, right? But we're going to see that the whole approach to class and the exclusivity of certain areas within the pub was really, really key how they evolved over time. Now, it's interesting, I've got some census information just to give you a sense of who used to live here over the years. And we're going to see that there was quite a high turnover of the publicans. So these are just some of the census information for 1861. So we can see who was the publican at the time, his family, son and daughter. Some of the staff lived as well on site. And you had the pot boy, the pot man, basically just cleaning all the pots, all the glasses, everything else. But maybe some of the rooms sometimes were also used for just lodgers. Passing through, you're going to see there were quite a few bedrooms originally. This is 1871 census. This is when John Ayres was the publican, 27-year-old. A nursemaid, servant, young son. Now, interestingly, back in the day, you could actually get pub tokens. And this is a red line pub token from the 1870s. If you can find one on eBay, let me know. All right? And this is really rare. But the idea is that at a time where people didn't want to carry cash, you could just buy this as a form of credit. So you could just buy these tokens in advance, they go to the fairground, then you just sort of walk in, and you can either get food, pint, live in lodgings using your tokens. Maybe we should reintroduce those with your name on it. I never know, probably going to be digital on your phone instead though. But yeah, it's quite nice to see that tangible piece of the pub's history. This is now the 1881 census. So you can see that people didn't stick around for a very long time. It wasn't 30, 40 years of the same family. Probably some reasons for that. Maybe it wasn't that easy to run a pub, pretty much like it is today, I'm guessing. So it's quite interesting to just see all the different names, all the people that passed through. This is a nice photo from 1890 of the original pub. You can clearly see the difference between the two original houses. This was the Georgian Row. This house is still there, the one just on the corner. It's a nice gate. You can see as well, if you look next to the number 114, usually the publican's name was included on the sign. Okay, because back then, publicans, that was a real deal. That was something quite important. It was quite an important role in society, certify legal documents. You had to obtain a license. You had to be a person of good standing and good character, right? Almost like a policeman or a lawyer. This is another lovely photo from 1890, just from the opposite angle. There's a lot of fascinating detail going on there. Looks like an actual painting. I was always drawn to that guy standing there looking very bemused with his cart. And I actually was able, with the help of a friend, to find out who that person was. So this was James Sargent, who was a milkman, lived nearby. So probably did his milk run, and I thought, I'll go into the red line for a drink. 1891 now. New occupants, people come and go. You have a cook, you have a nursemaid, barmaid. And the following year, there was a new owner, and they advertised this in one of the local newspapers. Cigars of the finest brands, the red line. Nightlife spirits, finest ales. This is now around 1902. You can also just about see the name of the publican at the time. Robert Hoist was the publican from 1900 to 1904. This is about 1910. You can see the name of the brewery, Truman. Okay. All the pubs were tied to, or most of them, if it wasn't a free house, were tied to a very small number of breweries. But that all changed in 1989, so as a result of the beer orders, where all the breweries, whether it was Courage or Truman, were ordered to sell off a lot of their pubs to increase competition in the market. What people didn't realize is that instead of the breweries, you're going to have pubcos buying all the pubs. Instead of 5 breweries, you're going to have 5 companies. But that was one of the criticism. But that's the reason why you see, in most cases, the name of the brewery that used to run and own this pub. This was their distribution channel. So all the beer was Truman. Either go and buy a bottle or a jug. You can go and sit, enjoy a drink inside. So when you take a step back and you look at this map from 1894, you can see that the footprint of the pub was quite big. So the area at the back, we're going to delve into that in a second, but that's where the garden is today, right? And we're going to talk about some of the buildings behind it, which are relevant as well. Because the two next to it, which are kind of just behind the beer garden, right? So this little alleyway was originally called Red Line Lane. A lot of times you had roads named after the pub, so people recognize it. Now you might be familiar with this arch entrance to number 6A Logic Road. But you can see that originally there were two of those, and they were side by side. One of them we can see had the keystone 1824, the one next to it 1806. And this was the parish lockup. So if you were naughty, if you were drunk and disorderly, hence why it was behind the pub, if you said a curse word or if you were not being nice, and you're going to see some of the other offenses, you would end up in what was basically known as the cage. So it's not just about being barred, it's about you going into the cage. Sober up. So the keystone with 1824 is still there. For 200 years, you can still see it. This is an old photo of what the parish lockup looked like a long time ago. And it was very small, because parish lockups, if you think about it, was a small village, there wasn't meant to be 100 people there. And if you look at other ones from across the country, right? Ooh, look at all these lockups. Now, this would be a luxurious one-bedroom flat with a great view of the park. But, I think it's great. I would love to hang things on that one. But you can see that the lockup was a very small structure, right? And the ones that we had behind us, my conclusion from the research is there was one from 1806, and then they added a second one in 1824. The village was growing, maybe the beer was getting better as well, people were getting drunk. Now, it always says when you read the records that the lockup also had the whipping post and the stocks, right? So if you were really naughty, you're going to see. So the stocks were just a frame, so you get basically locked in. It wasn't to cause you pain as much as social embarrassment and humiliation. You would get stuck there, sometimes for days. People pass by, do some really sort of unpleasant things, from throwing tomatoes and eggs to spitting and whatnot. But the whipping post, that's really for more, I would say, severe offenses, right? And that was all part of that little area at the back. In 1821, they also added an engine house, which was the original fire station for the whole parish. When we say engine house, it was probably just a bucket and a ladder, right? But it made sense to keep it as part of that. So this is the accounts from 1704. I'll let you just absorb that, absorb my Guinness. It wasn't managed by the pub, but it was part of the kind of the Red Line complex. But by 1983, there was a lot of redevelopment. The area was getting tidied up. A lot of old, sometimes even old factories were knocked down. In this case, you can see that the old parish lockup, one was completely almost gone, the entrance was bricked up, so is this one. And the whole site was redeveloped. In 1988, nothing was left apart from the door case with that 1824 keystone, and they just built a whole new building just around it, which is what you see today. There's a very clear distinction between the white building and that old door case with the barred window. So the only thing that survives today of that lockup is just door case. Looks like that. There's a local heritage plaque just on the outside. So the curved house just on the corner, that was the watch house, and that was really just for the watchmen. So the watchmen were, if you like, doing patrols at night, probably catching all the drunken people that ended up in the lockup. It wasn't to watch the road, but that was like the police station of the time, before the one opened on the high street. Now, let's take a closer look at what the old Red Line used to look like. This is a fascinating plan from 1923 that was drawn by the architect that designed this one. So it was almost like taking a survey, and it gives us a really detailed view of what the original old Red Line used to look like. We're going to study this in detail. There's going to be a quiz tomorrow. But we're going to go through some of these. So first, if you look at the first floor and the second floor, you saw in the census information that there were a lot of people that came in and were lodging, not just the staff, not just the publican and his family. I think there were about 11, counted about 11 or 12 bedrooms all around, right? Something like that. So you can see there was this one. There were, as we're going to see, there were actually 3 where the garden is now, because you had 2 parlor rooms. Those were very exclusive rooms, very padded, very nice, but they were out the back. and this was the second floor. And this was the pub itself. And it's fascinating to see this, because you realize that originally the old Red Lion was like a maze. There wasn't an open plan like you have it now. It was a very hierarchical space divided with timber screens, and each area was designated. You can see it says public, private, saloon, parlor, public. And then you've got the parlor number 2, parlor number 4, there's one here as well. It was a complete complex of much more intimate, smaller rooms than what we kind of know today. Because again, public house, it was meant to feel like a house. It was meant to feel when you go and have a drink in a very intimate setting. And if someone from that period came here tonight, they would think this is a warehouse. It's just so open. I can see everyone. I just wanted a nice quiet drink with my friend. So each one of those could pretty much only have like a couple of tables, 2 chairs. So a very different experience. And we're going to see what's the difference between all of them. Right, so just a closer look at that floor plan. And you can see that the staff was able to move around freely and serve all those sections. And that's why all the original pubs always had the counter in the middle, usually either a complete circle or just a horseshoe shape. So they can move around, just serve everyone. But people had to know which entrance to go through, right? And if you came to the wrong one, you were asked politely to go to the other one. So let's just sort of move to section 2 now, just to talk a bit about historic pub sections, because I think that's really key to understand the evolution and the architecture of the Red Lion, both old and new. Some of you might remember these, but I'm sure there's people that this will probably be completely new. So what were these private, public, parlor, saloon, lounge, all those things? One thing, class. In a very hierarchical society, people didn't mix, everything was split based on, are you working class, lower, middle class, upper class, and so on and so on. And based on whether it's your dress code, whether it's by what you're expecting to do in a pub, are you just there to have a quiet drink with missus, or are you going to play dominoes and darts with your friends from the factory? All right, you had a very specific area where you had to go to. And all these entrances to all these different rooms were very clearly marked. So you couldn't just walk into the saloon in your overalls and flat cap and say, "Ooh, I didn't know this was a saloon." And you can still see those. They survive on quite a few pubs. Another local pub, for example, the Rosencrantz, still has the private bar, the public bar signs as well. The saloon lounge is on the Three Crowns. See it there as well. We're going to see what it looked like. So if you ever wondered, what are all those names above all these entrances? They had a very specific purpose. They're not just random. Now, those names vary significantly. If you think the dotted line is in the wrong place, it's fine. I keep moving it every talk based on someone's feedback. But the idea is that you can see that between pubs and even in certain regions, there's a very, I would say, kind of diverse range of all these names. Sometimes you hear about the snug, where the old ladies would go and have a quiet drink, or the priest or the policeman would go into the snug or the private bar. But there was quite a variation. Ladies' bar, hello, all right? So at a time where women on their own could probably not just walk into the public bar and sit next to the guy playing dominoes, this was probably the safest option. And just a few other examples just to show you. So this is just a pub in Southgate that I just like, because when you actually look at the floor plan, it is, it's a house. If you look at a floor plan of a house today, we've got different rooms, kitchen, bedrooms, and lounge, and so on. It was a very, very specific layout. As you can see here as well, as I mentioned, that the staff was able to freely move around in a circle and serve everyone. They were completely uninterrupted by this layout. And today, all you have is what I call these ghost doors. As I said, so most pubs, if they were purpose-built pubs, so Ryan's was a shop, the Old Lady was a shop, so they only have one entrance. But all the other purpose-built pubs in the area, Rosencrantz, this one, Clarence, the Crowns, Jolly Butchers, Coach and Horses, all of them will have at least 2 doors, one for the public, one for the saloon. I was always curious about what does that layout actually look like in reality. There are not many photos, but I was quite intrigued to find out that these partitions and screens, it wasn't to create like an enclosed, really small space. It was still meant to give people a sense that they're in a nice pub, but it still created that separation. We wanted to find that fine balance between claustrophobia and coziness and intimacy. So a lot of times you're going to see these partitions, we're not even all the way up to the ceiling. They're probably just this high. So you could be standing here with your friends from the factory, the guys from the bank would be standing on the other side, and everything that, oh, the only thing that separated between you was just this thin layer of timber and frosted glass. This is just another, this is actually from a film from 1942. Unfortunately, very, very few pubs still retain that type of historic interior. This is a very sad statistic, and that book is from 2004. I bet you that now is even lower than that. A lot of pubs over the years became kind of like modernized. Society was changing, right? The idea that you have some people are allowed in one section but not another, that changed. And a lot of pubs just removed those screens, they removed those partitions, and went basically like a single room, open plan. But just to show you some examples, so this is by far, I would say, the holy grail of partitions. This is the Prince Alfred in Maida Vale. Right? Lovely, lovely, lovely. There are sort of 5 sections, all original. And you can just see just the craftsmanship that went into creating those screens. It wasn't just about putting like a plaster wall. It was actually part of the decoration. It was part of the interior. This is the castle in Harrow. You can see there are these little doors, little hatches. These were for the potboys to go underneath and collect all the glasses and bring them to the kitchen. This is the King's Arms in Waterloo. Really nice pub. You can just see the variety, and sometimes it incorporated glass, frosted, colored. It wasn't meant to feel something that really created that division or partition. It was just part of the interior. A local pub, the Jolly Butchers, when it used to have that sort of central counter in the middle, you can see the screens it used to have. Half of it was timber, half of it was glass. Right? When you just want to have a quiet drink without being interrupted, go there. Some pubs you can see some relics. So in some cases they now leave the door open. You probably walk past and through it, but you don't realize that this probably was shut originally, right? But it's still there as a feature. The Shakespeare. Next time you visit and you walk underneath that kind of the price list, this used to be the partition. Right? And you can see they kept the frame, and now they're utilizing the top bit rather than just take the whole thing down. I mentioned the saloon lounge in the Three Crowns, and when I said that the public was really, kind of like spit and sawdust, very basic, wooden furniture, nothing fancy at all. But the saloon, that was really the most exclusive, the most refined space. So this is what we know today. This was the former saloon bar, but this is what it used to look like originally. Wow. Imagine booking that for a birthday meal now. Yeah, quite exclusive, quite VIP, definitely. But bear in mind again that the interesting thing that this was really the most pristine and exclusive side of the pub. But right next to it was the public bar, where you could go, in your overalls, in your greasy work clothes, in your boots, in your flat cap, and play darts and dominoes. It was fine, but it was just the idea that the whole place was very carefully designed to cater to the full range of society. This is the Shakespeare. This was the former saloon bar in the Shakespeare. And the Shakespeare is a bit more like a backstreet pub, so the saloon bar wasn't as flashy as the Three Crowns. But still quite nice. Right? There's always kind of some plants and ferns were very big in saloon bars and lounges. You wouldn't just go in here after a shift in the factory. There were a lot of factories around, a lot of clothing, a lot of carpentry, piano making. But you wouldn't go to this section of the pub after a work day when you were probably not the tidiest. Notice these things here on the bar itself. So not only did you have the partitions to create the division between people, even if it was only symbolic, but there was actually a form of segregation or partitioning also on the counter itself called the snob screen. So if you're in the saloon bar and for maximum privacy, after you order the drink, so you don't happen to catch the gaze of the working class person on the other side of the pub, you would just close the panel and say bye-bye, and you would only open it to order your next round. There are only 8 of these original surviving in the country. Only 8. Okay, so it's not screens. So we looked at some saloon bars. These are some photos of public bars. They also evolved over time. Women originally were probably not allowed in, but that changed. But you can see it's a very different vibe, let's say, from the saloon. Right? Today you go into a pub and you kind of think about what's the atmosphere you're looking for. Are you looking for like a proper kind of boozer? Are you looking for more like a gastro restaurant? Are you looking for something more refined? You gotta take your wife or a girlfriend or boyfriend. The great thing is, back in the day, you had all of those under the same roof. Right? You could meet someone for a date in the saloon, say goodbye, go into the public bar to play darts. Right? So this was the public bar. There's a great book that's been reprinted. It's available in the local bookshop on the high street, which I strongly recommend. It's called Back to the Local from 1949. And I just included a few little quotes just to give you a sense of what it says. So, public bar, the plebeian side of the pub, where everything is cheapest, where nothing is charged for decoration, where pints of ale are the most popular drink, where there are no pin tables and darts, shove penny, and dominoes, are played by people who have played them all their lives. And another one which I like, there are many public bars where any patron who is too obviously not dressed as a laborer is regarded with distrust. His presence is resented by the patrons as well as by the management on natural grounds that he can afford the saloon bar. The drinks in the saloon were a bit more expensive, fractionally, but it was almost like a symbolic thing. So you don't just go into the public bar, get a drink, and then go to the saloon and sit on the coffee seat. You don't do that. And interestingly, and we're going to see this around us here, the difference in the spaces was not just the furniture and the fixtures and the fittings, but even you can see the wooden paneling of these pubs. So you can see that in the public bar, it's a very straightforward pattern, these panels, these boards, the saloon bar, and just look behind you. If you look on this side, this was originally the public bar in the plan. This was the private in the saloon. You can see that they made a bit more, I guess, kind of effort just to make it feel a bit more exclusive, but even look on the walls. If you compare the walls of this section of the pub compared to this one, you can see that it's a bit more decorative, a bit more ornate with all the wooden details. Right, so you can have a look during the break. In the Rose and Crown, you can actually see the difference in the counter as well. So the people that used to drink with kind of probably more dirty work clothes, you have this. In the private bar, people probably wearing suits, a bit more refined as well, got a different treatment. And that's exactly the difference between those two. If you want to learn more about all this great stuff, which I can go on for hours, but I can't. These are great books I highly recommend. A lot of examples, a lot of quotes, a lot of photos, a lot of drawings, if this becomes your new passion. If it does, get in touch. All right, next section. So in 1924, there was road widening. And this was not a one-off event. By the 20s and 30s, there was more vehicles, more sort of traffic on the roads. But a lot of these roads were just country roads, basically the width of a lane. So that one milk cart and horse a week. But as you had more cars and you had even the trams and the buses in some cases, they had to start making more space. And as a result of that, they widened the road. And the result of that, in some cases, buildings had to be knocked down and rebuilt. These are the drawings I'm going to dive into that show you how this whole triangle had to be truncated and shaved off just to create more space. And this was not just the case here. A few years later, the original Rose and Crown was demolished and rebuilt across the street when the whole Albion Road, Church Street Junction was also widened. Right? So this was happening all over the place. This is the view of Lordship Road. If you compare between those two photos, you can see that this building here used to have another lovely window the other side, and all this was completely demolished. You can see here as well, there's a skip. Even though it's not to scale, but imagine, look at the width of this car compared to the skip, and how much space is here, how much space is available next to it. This is just a comparison of the footprint, because you can see that when they demolished the old pub and they had to come up with a plan for the new pub, the current red line we're in now was significantly smaller. You know, you have these two old, quite big houses, but the new one, well, they couldn't fill the same space. So the yellow line, kind of the original one, you can see in comparison the one that was built on the site. Interestingly, on that plan as well, they even went to the detail of showing you those angled entrances just behind me. I was curious to find out and compare between the widening of Church Street. I looked at different scientific ways of measuring it, Google Maps and so on, and I got stuck. So you'll have to forgive this kind of more like an improvised way of doing it. I thought, okay, how many people would fit if you lined them up on the street? In this photo, it's 8 people. Present day, what do you think? It was 8 in 1890. How many people would fit here today? Numbers? 11. As I said, it's not the most scientific, but you have to go with it. Gives you an approximation, gives you an idea, right? Cool, so now let's talk about the rebuilt red line. Woo! Yes, so this is the one that we hear now. And we're going to see how it was designed and exactly why. So this red line was designed by a very esteemed architect. This was designed by Truman's Brewery chief architect, Arthur Edward Sewell. He designed about 50 pubs for the brewery. And some of them are still around, and I bet you know some of them. They're really cool. When you go in, and it's great, especially if you know the red line very well, because it's like siblings, and you start recognizing certain features. And you realize that they've got the same DNA. It's the same architect. We used to actually have on Bowling Road, it was the Arundel Arms, which was demolished. There's the Army and Navy, there's the Rose and Crown as well. So quite a few 4 pubs that he designed were just in the area. These are the original drawings by Arthur Edward Sewell for this pub, which are really amazing because it really gives you a sense of exactly how he intended it or designed it. There may have been some changes when it actually got built, but we're going to dive into those in the next few minutes. So actually, you can see that this plan was drawn in 1924, in August. So I think technically, you could say that the pub was actually rebuilt in 1925. The good news is we're going to do this again next year. Right? Yay! But you can say this was the original or the origin that rebuild project. So I think it's good. It's good. Just to show you some of the lovely hand-drawn plans of the pub. Now you can see that this pub is very different from a lot of other pubs that you might have seen. These interwar pubs were designed in a very different style from what we know is kind of the gin palaces. You know, those very ornate, decorative castles that you see in the city. For various reasons, during that sort of period, there was a lot of change. You had, whether it was after the First World War, magistrates were also clamping down on licenses. Pubs had quite a bad reputation, and the idea was to provide a more respectable environment. And the plan was to create them in a very different style. No longer it's going to be this Victorian drinking palace, but it's going to be something that looks more nostalgic. It looks something more like a nice little village inn, something that you can walk into in the countryside. More welcoming for families, and even women. That was the plan. And that's why this design is neo-Tudor. These are the elevations. Okay, so this is Lordship Road. You can see this is this side. This was actually the entrance to the toilet that used to be from outside. But this is a stark contrast, as I said, to the what we call kind of the gin palaces. So these were the very lavish pubs that made kind of to look almost like a cathedral, with a lot of glitz and glamour and all the etched glasses and the mirrors and the brass. The reformed / informed reform pub of the interwar years that Sewell was the expert in designing were meant to be the complete opposite. A lot of wood paneling. You don't get any of all these fixtures and fittings. It was meant to be less rowdy, more welcoming. This is the interior. You can see you had the saloon, you had the public bar, all the bedrooms, the cellar. We're going to talk about the public bar. There was also a tap room, which was exactly where you are now. And we're going to see that the partitions were pretty much, you can see there was one here, there was on either side of that door, and then there was one exactly where that pizza sign, just there. You can see that in a minute. Right? I mean, those are the partitions that are in the plan. I don't know if Sewell just put them in for reference, so if this was the original one. This is another pub that Sewell designed in 1936. This is the Stag's Head in Hoxton. Still has its original partitions, just to give you a rough idea what they might have looked like or similar to. you can actually see in the red line, there's a very fainted trace of one of those old partitions. It's just there where the card machine is. It's an infill where I suspect one of the partitions to the off license used to go. So that's all that's left of the red lines partitions. Yeah, there might be like a little plaque next to it saying this used to be the partition. And you can see that, as you'd expect, the new pub was also divided very clearly between the different sections. So originally, this was designated as the public bar, where we are now. You had a very narrow corridor, which was that door, and this was the off license. So this is just where you go and you fill a jug, take it home, or you just buy bottles. Right? That was it. The private bar there, the saloon, and the bar parlor. That's at the very back, where when I first came here, that was like an office space, very messy, just with the staff. You can just sit down and have coffee or tea or a drink. But this was really the most exclusive one. So this is you have to basically get taken there by the manager and have a very quiet drink. Right? You couldn't just walk straight in. So you can see that that partition was still there, as you'd expect in the 1920s. You can see this was the urinal entrance from outside. Right? As I mentioned, the bottles and jug has a lot of names, off license, off sales. It's just here, so this was the entrance. So children would often get sent just to fetch a jug. Here, a lot of people told me over the years that their first drink was actually just taking a sip at the age of 8 on the way home. Right? This is the old off license and the Stags had, but it's really good because you get a sense just how narrow that area was. You just walk in. So this was the off license, and all the other areas were the on license. There's still a sign above this entrance about the license for on or off the premises. So the off references the off sales area that used to be. So this is just a comparison of the two plans. You can see that we still had a saloon, a private. This actually shows also there was a tap room. So there was a screen just here. And from what I read, the public bar was very lively. Like I said, dominoes and darts and so on. The tap room was almost the equivalent to the private bar but for the working class. If you didn't want to take part in all the kind of the very rowdy behavior that was taking place here, you basically get a little hatch. You just get served, maybe directly from the can as well. Hence the name tap room. Right? And if you compare the two, just to get a sense of the difference in scale and size between the old red line and the new red line. One of the features that Sewell used quite heavily in his design to make pubs more welcoming, less intimidating, was these lovely vitrolite ceilings that were meant to create a very kind of open, airy atmosphere. The red line had these until at least 1986. I suspect that when it was taken over and became the Magpie Stop in 1988, the partitions went, and also the ceiling. Here you can still see them, Rose and Crown, Army and Navy, the Royal Oak, Columbia Road. This is the first floor plan. So if you go up the stairs, there was a dining and a club room. And then the flat, you had a sitting room, bedroom. This is the second floor plan, all the bedrooms. There's a second plan that's colored, which is also very nice. So this is a lovely, I'd love that on a t-shirt. Yeah. Should have had that, yes, definitely. Very nice. And I've just got a few photos of the red line, the new one, over the years. You see some things that have changed, some things that are pretty much the same. So this is 1955. You can see the name of the brewery still up there. You know exactly if you're going to a Truman's house or a Courage house or a Watney or so on or a Whitbread. It meant something. The quality of the beer, the loyalty to the brand, and so on. It was everywhere. This is 1975. And these are photos that Kathy just sent me like 4 hours ago of her parents serving, standing behind. And so they're facing that way, this way. Exactly. So there used to be, and I still remember it when I first came in 2002. Back in the middle, there was this central bar back storing all the bottles and glasses, and it was its own partition. You could, if you were sitting there, and the counter was much longer as well, for the pizza kitchen, you couldn't see across. When they removed it one day and we all walked in, it was amazing. It was like, oh my God, it's so big now. You can see across. And this is another photo that Kathy sent me. She's going to talk maybe a bit about the Eric Bristow connection to the pub and how this is where he learned his trade. So it can all be traced to the Red Lion. This is 1982. And this is from 1983. And you see this a lot. I mean, I think up to at least the 90s, most pubs were run by a couple. And you had a lot of lovely advertisements before sort of Christmas and a lot of photos. It's always the couple, with kind of buttoned up and a suit and a tie, taking it very seriously. This is circa 1989, thereabouts, maybe sort of late 80s. There's a nice red line on the door there. This is 1993, now it's the Magpie and Stump. And then it was the Tuck in the mid-late 90s. A few years ago in 2015, they did some work on the signage, and the Tuck sign was revealed underneath. It was removed. This is what I remember when I first walked through these doors and went upstairs to the open mic, Stoke Tuck. This is 2006, it was the Lion, and upstairs was the Lion's Den. It was kind of functional. Very original. So we covered quite a lot. So think about from the original old Red Lion, those two buildings and how they got merged together, how it evolved to have all these sections to cater to the whole range of society. And sometimes people just didn't want to mix, so they had the expectation that they only occupied and socialized in a particular area. Talking about the road widening and how that impacted the pub as far as demolishing the old one and the new one. So I think next time you walk through these doors, whether it's what was originally the public, but Kathy will tell you became the saloon, or if this was the private and that was the saloon and this was the off-license, think about it used to be a partition key, or this was the place you go for the class. Hopefully a whole newfound perspective and appreciation, just how much this pub has changed. I guess it's still changing over the years. So with that, I'll say thank you very much.